All right. Well, it has been a while since I've done one of these, and I can't even remember what my topic was back in the day. I probably had something to do with a book coming out, and I've written since then, but I haven't been good at publishing. So we're talking about death and the poet, and we have been talking on campus in my classes about elegy, and I don't think I realized until well after I had agreed to do this that November was going to be the month that I was going to be slated to do this. And November is hard for me because years and years ago, I lost my husband to leukemia when we were still in our 30s. And it was November when he died. So ever since, the month comes around and I have a wonderful life. I have some kids that I didn't expect to have. I've had a new husband. But you know, if you've lost somebody that mattered to you, most of us don't get very far into our lives before we're losing a grandparent or a good friend or somebody that you have to figure out how to navigate and how to not fall too deeply into depression, but you can't really avoid it. So you go through lots of different stages, and they are not tidy. They don't happen kind of in the order of, well, now I'm grieving, and now I'm in shock, and now I'm recovering. They go back and forth and up and down, and you are often blindsided when you think you're doing fine, and you prepare for something that you think will be very hard, and it's not. So when I think about elegies, when I thought about the topic, I thought that my first child, when he came and asked me what happens when we die, and was pretty young, you know how kids, they are full of brilliant questions that you can't answer when they're toddlers, and his were particularly interesting to me. He'd say things like, Mama, are there more leaves in the world or more rocks? You know, and there you sit going, huh? You know, and another one he had that he was just always kind of, little kids are, they're poets, whether they know anything about anything, they are. Another one that I still remember was, if bees make honey, do wasps make syrup? And there too you go, you know, there's a kind of logic to that. Because I don't know what it is exactly, but it's sort of true. So yeah, there were a lot of those kind of questions, and then finally the day of what happens when we die. And I don't remember what I said to him, but I've been interested in poems of lamentation and of sorrow and of grief going way, way back to my childhood. My parents blame it on the fact that they were in grad school when I was born, and my dad was learning Beowulf. And so that was the story they kept telling me, and I was learning it in the Old English, I guess, and repeating it back. So it might be something about that. But I was thinking as I thought about the talk, how are there more, when I think about my son's question about more leaves or rocks, are there more love poems in the world? Are there more elegies, more grief poems? And I think we can't decide because they're the same thing. I think that when we are grieving, especially when we're grieving hard, it's commensurate with the love, the loss. So I think when elegies work on us, it depends a little bit on the tone. It depends a little bit for the listeners or for the audience on where you are in the whole, you know, you're in a different place when someone first dies than you are later. So what I did for my class was put together the little packets that you got over there by the door. If you didn't, there's a whole bunch, so help yourself. It's just a collection. They're not the best elegies in the world. They're the elegies that, a few of them I wrote when I was trying to make my way to someplace more manageable. but it's also the poems I found during those times of loss, and the poems that people gave to me, and the poems that brought me, if not comfort, a kind of recognition, I guess, that someone found language for this thing that you feel you have no language for. And it's not good if poets don't have language for the things they're thinking about, but I didn't for quite a while. So I suppose I should also mention that before I came to Augustana, I was in a grad school program with the poet Carolyn Forche, who is a human rights activist poet. And she was putting together her anthology called Against Forgetting, which they were poems out of the 20th century poetry of witness. So they were the poems written by people who had suffered conditions of extremity, either been exiled, been tortured, been on the battle lines, been censored. You know, they were the poems and the language coming from people who had suffered terribly. And I remember working on that. I was a graduate assistant for a while and thinking, this is the most depressing thing I've ever done. We were going through and started with the Armenian genocide, and it ended with Tiananmen Square because the book was getting published in 1993. So all these brutal conflicts and all the loss and all the different sorts of struggle. But there was also something really sustaining and powerful about it. And we used to talk about it a lot late at night while we were deciding if this poem was better than this one, and they're all, you know, cries into the dark. But Forche has believed and convinced me in those years that poetry was one of the most humane ways to try to contend with something that we really don't have tools for, or we have tools, but they don't take us where we are hoping to go. So if you're interested in that kind of poetry, that book's just called Against Forgetting, and I still have it, I still carry it around because depressing though they may be, it is human beings trying to reach through the despair and the loss to articulate, and that articulation is a way of connecting with people. So in your packet, why don't we look at a few? They're kind of like books. I had started out trying to categorize which ones seemed to me like poems of shock, or which ones seemed to me like poems of despair, screaming at God, you know, whatever. But it's too slippery. It's not neat enough to fit them into categories. So I kind of thought about tone. What's the tone of a certain kind of grief, a certain place that you land in? And I'll just, because it's right here, the first one, for a long time, I didn't write very much about Michael's death. It was too raw, it was too horrible, I just kind of couldn't do it. But this one, the first one in the packet, that's right under the one, if you look at it, it's not supposed to say shock, that's a typo. So just cross out in the title, shock doesn't belong there. It's just, how was it sudden, your long death? And actually the poem doesn't have a title, that was just the first line, and you know if you don't have a title, that becomes your first line. So this is one I've read on campus. I was thinking about it again since I'm just a couple weeks from the anniversary of his death. And he was sick for 2 years, two and a half years, had bone marrow transplants, went into remission. We got married in Joshua Tree. We had a wonderful but very brief time together, and that was part of my huge sorrow. But here it was, if you see some imagery that has to do with the desert, it's California is where he was being treated, so I was living in a little apartment there. So here's kind of the only one I wrote for a long time after he died. How was it sudden, your long death? shock, fixed black. Parking lots, ramps, the bright art in the hallways, flagrant flowers, a fish tank in the white places. One latex glove, like petals, spilled on the way to or from some room with a horror in it. Glass coffin, rice flour, your skin taking on radiation burn, your heart's new gallop, your eyes without you behind them. The toxic pills, soldiers in small paper cups. Each day the walk past hibiscus blossoms, each day's sunny traffic, peculiar trees with white thorns in the bark. Each day with white thorns. Your grip on the bed rail, the acid you vomit, the shiny cards you will not have pinned to the wall, the blood stains. Then, exile of such physical scope. My tongue torn from its place, incisions in every lungful of air, every day more frantic for tokens, strands, an old letter, words in your hand, some evidence that you were here. It was not fabrication, chimera, conceit, not like anything else, our language, your touch. Water in the Mojave, left off the maps. Wild mustard and bluffs in the cornfields, soft wind. When you died, the sky opened, it does not close. And I've talked about this poem since writing it. I think this one was published, I think Don Hall got his hands on it and published it in Plowshares or something. But I've been asked about the form, why some long lines, why short ones, why no punctuation, why, no ends to the sentences. And I think a lot of practicing poets will tell you that when they write a first draft, we don't know what we're doing. We're operating out of a feeling, out of an image, out of a memory, out of something. We don't know what we're gonna say about it necessarily. So I think if we had it all plotted out, it wouldn't be as satisfying an undertaking because it's the process of following the poem or following the mood to where it's going to take you and then learning things about it that sound a little new agey, and I don't mean to do that, but I think our poems are smarter than we are when we're first sitting down to write them. They know things, they will take us places that, if we're lucky, we're just trying to keep up and you figure things out later. I asked the class today, who's also looking at elegies, which of them struck them the most, and lots of different responses, but two that they brought up. One is just right across from mine, one called Coats by Jane Kenyon. Jane Kenyon, as you may know, died fairly young, had struggled with manic depression, but it was undiagnosed. And then she also ended up dying from leukemia. But she was a remarkable poet. And if you want somebody whose language is steady and kind of nothing extra, nothing excess. She's got a very clear eye, a kind of quiet tone and voice. And this one had intrigued the class, so it's just titled Coats. I saw him leaving the hospital with a woman's coat over his arm. Clearly, she would not need it. The sunglasses he wore could not conceal his wet face, his bafflement. As if in mockery, the day was fair, and the air mild for December. All the same, he had zipped his own coat and tied the hood under his chin, preparing for irremediable cold. And we talked about that one as, this type of poem is often in the first person voice of the person suffering. This one is like somebody observing something and determining based on the details what might have happened, what must have happened. The coat that the man is walking out of the hospital with, maybe they just got a bad diagnosis and the partner's staying there for now, or maybe she's just died. And so all the little details about the observation, that bafflement and the act of zipping your coat up when you really don't need it, at least the weather's fine. He didn't need to be sheltered in his coat, but what was going on inside needed shelter. And so we do what we do. We turn to what we turn to. And so in a very quiet way, it's empathetic, it's matter of fact, it's just an observation. But there seems to be a little nod or a little recognition or a little suggestion of what we might be looking at, what we might be observing. The other one, just flip a couple pages over, and it's the one titled Michiko Dead, and it looks like a box. It's in between Stop All the Clocks and When a Friend Dies. So if you see either of those, Michiko Dead is in between. Jack Gilbert has written more than a few poems about the loss of his wife, and this is one of them. He manages like somebody carrying a box that is too heavy, first with his arms underneath. When their strength gives out, he moves the hands forward, hooking them on the corners, pulling the weight against his chest. He moves his thumbs slightly when the fingers begin to tire, and it makes different muscles take over. Afterward, he carries it on his shoulder until the blood drains out of the arm that is stretched up to steady the box, and the arm goes numb. But now the man can hold underneath again, so that he can go on without ever putting the box down. So we had some interesting discussions about this one as well. I realize this is what we would call a cold read. You don't have time to study the poems, you're just getting them, and you have to kind of assemble what you notice, what's going on in the poem. I have a lot of students who kind of identify that box as the coffin, and maybe this is a pallbearer. But the box seems to me to be one that the person carrying can carry on his own, right? It's his arms that are going numb, or he's got to put them down. So then the box seems to me to be grief or loss or despair, whatever emotion you've got there. So the question the students ask, because they're so young, is why doesn't he put it down? Why doesn't he want to put it down? If it's making his arms so sore, why is he carrying it? And that question seems to be really central to what happens to us when we lose somebody. We do have to go on with our lives, whatever that ends up meaning at some point. But we aren't going to forget those that we've lost. I think especially of parents who lose children, they're not going to be okay at some point and be all right that they lost the child. They're not going to put the grief down. They will figure out how to keep operating in the day and how to move on, but we do it differently. And this is a hard thing to wrestle with, is how do you go on with things when you have lost somebody that you don't wish to forget or to put aside or to get over, or whatever we're told we ought to be trying to do. And that brings me to a friend of mine at Augustana who lost both parents and then a brother, and had to contend with, I'm almost an orphan. I'm an orphan as far as the parents go because they're gone. Sibling is gone. how do you get up in the morning? How do you continue about the day? How do you continue to honor the people that we miss, rather than sort of disappearing into our own despair? How much time do we get to disappear into our despair? How much time do we get? Because of course the people who love us want us to feel better, and they are trying really hard to help us feel better. And sometimes it does the exact opposite, because you feel like you don't get it. You don't understand. So this friend, when she was organizing her mother's funeral, it was during COVID, so it had to be virtual. I remember her saying, I want something that is a scream into the dark, that is utterly inconsolable, that is sort of this is not tolerable, this is not acceptable, I cannot adapt to this. And then also one that was a little more, I don't know what the word is, calming, maybe just quiet, maybe. So they're both in here, and I thought, look at those. If you flip ahead to, it looks like a paragraph. It's in section 3. It's right, the first one in section 3. It's an excerpt from Toni Morrison's book, Sula. Everybody find it? So this is just a passage, and the speaker is remembering a former attitude toward the grieving that was happening around them and around her, and then what's happening in the moment of the poem. So it reads, she thought of the women at Chicken Little's funeral, the women who shrieked over the bier and at the lip of the open grave. What she had regarded since as unbecoming behavior seemed fitting to her now. They were screaming at the neck of God, his giant nape, the vast back of the head that he had turned on them in death. They could not let that heart-smashing event pass unrecorded, unidentified. It was poisonous, unnatural to let the dead go with a mere whimpering, a slight murmur, a rose bouquet of good taste. Good taste was out of place in the company of death. There must be much rage and saliva in its presence. The body must move and throw itself about. The eyes must roll. The hands should have no peace. And the throat should release all the yearning, despair, and outrage that accompany the stupidity of the loss. That I remember thinking is exactly right in the moment. Maybe it won't be exactly right later, but in the moment, for the person in this state of, I can't do it, I can't accept it, I won't accept it, I'm not going to set it down, I can't be well behaved. And if you have grieved, you are aware of people worrying about you, around you, thinking, oh, it's been long enough. They need to get out there. They need to get over it. They need to. And when you're in it, there's not much sense of control. I remember trying everything that anyone ever recommended when I lost my husband. I changed my diet. I exercised. I didn't exercise. I went and stayed at a convent for a week to meditate. I went and got Reiki. I read this. I went to therapy, of course. I was in group. You sort of do everything. And I never felt better or different, or you kind of do it because what else are you going to do? But it's a very lonely place to be, and it's very, at least the way I experienced it, very selfish. Didn't have room for somebody else's worry about me or about anything else. There was just this sense of, I'm doing everything I can to hold myself together, and you've got to let me do it. You might need to comfort me, but I might not want you to put your arms around me right now. Or maybe I do. So grief is this strange, shifting, untidy, I don't know, I was thinking about, so it will be 27 years since Michael died, and I mentioned that earlier. 2 years ago, after having several Novembers that I felt pretty good and thought, oh, okay, I'm in a different place, this is better. All of a sudden, I was driving up to Minnesota to see my parents and help them clean, and it was just for a long weekend. And a song came on, and it wasn't even a song that was connected to Michael. It was just a song about grieving a loss. And all of a sudden, it's, you get ambushed. It was like my car was rolling over into the ditch, and I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm gonna die. Something has happened. This is terrible. Don't know how long it'll go on. Pulled over, kinda, even though I thought I was rolling. And I wasn't. I was sitting on the shoulder, hadn't hit anything, hadn't rolled the car, but I was just sobbing, and I was kind of crawling out of the car into the ditch in the middle of nowhere in northern Minnesota on my way to my parents, just crying like I had cried in the beginning. And you think maybe I'm going crazy. I was in a better place, what's going on? And I think part of grieving that is so uncomfortable is you don't know when it's going to rise up in you again, that it is there and it stays there and it changes. But one of the reasons I put this little batch together was because these were poems that somehow spoke to me in different stages. And I can also talk a little bit, if you're interested, in the difference between being the person who writes the poem, trying to survive the grief, and someone who reads the poem or gets given the poem, because they can both comfort incredibly. So let's see, let's take a look at, Sula was the scream into the darkness. The one that, I hope I'm remembering this right, that was the calmer one is, it's toward the end, it's the second to last poem in the batch. So again, this is Jane Kenyon, the same one of Coates. And this is a poem that gets read often at funerals. So here's Let Evening Come. Let the light of late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come. So if you set that one next to the excerpt from Sula, I think you get kind of the range of where your emotions go, the rage and the despair and the not being able to understand, not being able to acclimate or adjust to the new reality. And then you get, if you're lucky at some point, you get to the place of Jane Kenyon's thinking. I don't know if, God does not leave us comfortless. When you're feeling comfortless, you'll say, yeah, there's nobody here. I'm not feeling anything. I can tell you another story that some of you in the community might have known. Gertrude Lundholm, who was connected to Augustana, and she had lost her husband, Beanie. I think she was in her early 40s and had several kids and had to raise them alone. She was a friend of mine and of our family and of some of my students that I've had since. But she was a little spitfire. She was often out at Holden Village, drove herself out there against her kids' wishes with a sort of dummy in the seat beside her because they didn't want her to be driving alone. So she figured if she put a dummy with a baseball cap on and went by herself across country, it would be fine, and it was. But she came over one day kind of early in my return to Augustana and sat down and said, "How are you doing? Don't answer that. I know you're not doing well. How could you be?" And she said, "I bet everyone's coming up to you and telling you it gets better. It'll get better with time. Or Michael wouldn't want you to be so sad. You got to pull yourself together because he wouldn't approve." And I think what I remember, part of the reason I hid from everybody was I couldn't navigate that stuff. I knew they meant well. I knew they were trying to help, but it just landed so wrong. So she had said, "This is how you're feeling, right?" And then she said, "And you just want to punch him in the teeth, don't you?" I thought, actually, yes. And she said, "Yeah, it's," how did she put it? She said, "It's never going to be okay that you lost the life and the person that you wanted to spend your life with. It's not going to come a time where you go, oh, well, that was all right. My life is better." But she said, and this has remained one of the most useful things anyone said to me was, it doesn't get better, but it does get different. And different will be what you need it to be. Different will be enough. Different will help. And because she'd been through it, but also there was just something sort of deep in me that thought, I know she's right. I know she's right about that. That something will be different, and that different will be enough. So let's see. Let's look at, are there any, we've got plenty of time. I want to leave time for you to ask questions. Again, you haven't had this in front of you to kind of study poems and figure out which ones you might want to talk about. I think, let's see. Anybody see one that you'd like us to look at? And if not, I've got plenty to say on all of them. So,
would you like to read one of yours?
I'm happy to read one of mine. I thought about starting just reading my way through my different moods and my different, my different words on the page. So I can do that, certainly. So you saw How Was It Said Near Long Death? And that really was the first one out of the emptiness of realizing that this person I loved, I was never going to hear his voice again. He wasn't going to ask me questions about myself and my life. I told this story in class today too. I used to want to dream about him so badly. I just wanted to see him in motion. And I was like, just come in a dream, I'd be able to see him laugh or talk or do something other than what all the pictures I have of him give me. And I didn't dream about him. And when I finally did, probably several years into grieving him, Michael was a very tall, he was 6'3", he was dark-haired, he was a philosophy scholar, so he tended to be quiet and introspective and a good listener. He didn't own a car, he rode his bike everywhere, he was a vegetarian, you could sort of get the picture. In the dream, I was in the mall somewhere, and there was a guy spritzing people going by with perfume, and he was quite short. He was, maybe 5 feet tall, blonde-haired, kind of roly-poly, and very happy about his job. We're really happy to be offering perfume to the people coming in. Somehow across the room, I thought, oh no, That's you. And why would you come back in that guise when I want to see you? And you would not be in a mall, and you would not be spritzing perfume, and you would not be wearing what you're wearing and trying to sell ladies' gloves. You know, it was, but somehow I knew it was him, and he was kind of smiling, and I thought, I can't go up and talk to you because you're an imposter. You know, I know it's you, but you're not you. And I was mad about that dream for a really long time because I think by now I've had a couple dreams, but that was very curious to me. It's like, if I'm finally going to get to see him, and I'm finally going to get to have a moment with him, why is he someone else? You know, why does he look like someone else? Let's take a look at, looking for my next one, Mourning Doves, which is on the first page of the section 3. I'm sorry the pages aren't numbered. We were scrambling to make some copies. There are some typos in there.
Agreed.
When I came back to Augustana, I was sleepwalking, but all my colleagues, the friends in the Quad Cities, everybody pulled together. I had a house to move into right on the edge of campus. I had people looking in on me, taking care of me, dropping food off. I slept in the top of this little house I was renting, and there were mourning doves up in there, and you could hear them. And this is sort of how my head was working in those days. So here's mourning doves. They mate for life. They have that very gentle, beautiful, calming coo. So I kind of liked them up there until I didn't. So here's mourning doves. They thrive in the walls of the attic, nesting, love moans, arguments. I liked it at first, their lives beside mine, yet concealed. Today, I want them gone. They live, and you are dead. They sleep, strut, have babies under the eaves, out of the rain, while you are gray ash and bone bits in a green blown glass bottle downstairs. If I weren't so full of the chasm you left, I would take an axe to the walls. I would slaughter them, and it wouldn't change a thing. So there's one of the other places that we go to.
You're doing great on time, but I did have a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we know to whom Auden was referring with Stop All the Clocks?
We have suspicions. Auden was a gay man with a lover, but lived during a time where he was cautious about how open he was about that. I'm not sure I actually know, but the storyline that I've heard most often was it was a lover that he lost. And I don't know what to, but Stop All the Clocks is one of those beautiful, desperate, fabulous poems too. Do you want to hear that one? Yeah, so nodding from the back. All right. All right. Stop All the Clocks is right next to Michiko Dead, if you had found that one earlier. And one of the reasons I love this is that it was to a lover he wasn't supposed to be in love with. And it reads, no matter who you are and who you're in love with, it reads with the same hurt, the same power. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let airplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Yes.
I just had a question. You notice in like the sixth line, "He is dead" is capitalized. I was wondering, like that. You mentioned earlier how specifically just the way that you shape it or capitalize certain things. Like, what do you think that is specifically looking for?
Often capitalization works similar to, say, italics, or to you're calling extra attention to it as a phrase. You know, here's the message going across the sky: he is dead. So it stands out a little bit in the sentence, but yeah, it could have been italicized. I suppose nowadays we would put a period after each word. You know, he is dead, just to emphasize the single syllables do a lot, you know, just to stop you and slow you down. So that's a good question, good observation. Yes?
When my father died, someone came and said, now that your father's dead, or apparently father, now that your father's dead, the wind blows straight into your face. I wonder if you know of
Where that comes from, or what the...
Yeah, where that came from.
Yeah, it seems like it might be. I mean, kind of, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. It seems like a kind of fabulous and accurate physical sensation, you know, kind of...
Down to earth, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like the guy in the parking lot carrying the woman's coat. You know, he's trying to keep himself warm even though it's a warm day. So kind of the emotional, cold of something like that. That's really powerful.
It was just amazing to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't explain it. I couldn't do anything with it other than just lean into it.
Yeah, that's perfect. You did the right thing. Yeah, John.
I have a question for you, more as a teacher than just a writer. By the way, I tend to like some of the more old-fashioned poems like Alfred Lord Tennyson,
Yes.
In Memoriam,
Yeah.
or Milton on the loss of his first son.
Yes.
But my question to you is, how do you inspire and mentor and manage to teach people writing in the current environment? This week, the Quad City Times, the Rock Island Argus, and the Moline paper have all laid off a certain number of people. It seems writing, especially in the printed form, is becoming almost, I was thinking of the idea of death, it's almost dying.
Yeah.
How do you, if you are counseling a student that wants to take to creative writing, for instance, how do you assure them that there is a future, there is a possibility for them going into something like creative writing?
To publish or to teach or both? You know, are you thinking, is there an audience for poetry, for creative writing? I'd be happy to know that the internet makes that very possible in a way that we didn't use to just have a list of people we could send a poem to and get feedback. Poetry, there's one of my poems in here is in response to the claim that comes all the time, poetry is dead. You know, nobody wants to read it, nobody understands it, nobody cares about it. And I've been hearing that and reading articles on that for many decades, and poetry is everywhere all the time. So in terms of teaching someone how to imagine that the world wants to hear what they have to say, if I'm hearing you right, I don't think you can stop it. I think, well, for instance, in class on Tuesday when we started talking about elegies, there's a very beautiful line in a poem by Lee Young Lee, the poet, that just says, everything is punished by your absence. It's just one line of a longer piece. And when we're doing free writing in class, we'll just give them one place to start and they just have to write. They're not going to count, well, they might count syllables, but the idea is just go wherever your head takes you. Don't worry what shape it's going to be in. Don't worry if it's an elegy or it's something else. And oh my goodness, you know, I put that on the board, and what came out of that right away in the minutes right after, one guy had his shirt sort of pulled up over his mouth saying, I just wrote this, I really want to read it. I might read it later and think it's stupid, but my family's dog just died, and I just learned this morning that the dog is gone, and maybe you're not supposed to be this sad about your pet, but I am. And so he kind of covered his face and read that poem, and it was heartbreaking and wonderful. And it was kind of like, when you're carrying that kind of thing with you, it doesn't take much sometimes to get you going. It's a long-winded answer to how do you teach it, but I appreciate the question because it's, do we teach anything useful? I think so. I hope so, yeah.
I would also just connect, like I'm a college student at Augustana. I feel like the last time I read poetry, I'm a biochem major, so I'm not usually reading poetry.
Yeah.
But so like the last time I probably was involved in this was high school, middle school.
Sure.
And like I would say exactly what you just said. It was a lot of the I don't see the point of this. Like like why are we reading this? But even now, 4, 5, 6 years later, after you have friends that have lost parents, even if you've not lost people, specifically yourself, I think you just start to connect with those experiences more.
Mm-hmm.
And like with this question about poetry dying, I feel like with the human experience, like you said, it could never die. But specifically, like while reading these, I would always be like, oh, like the words they're using, it's kind of giving you like this nostalgic feeling. Like the earth used to be like this, it's not like this anymore.
Yeah.
I think the older you get, the more experiences you have, you start to realize that like this life is the same as it was and continues to become more so. But my specific question for you was especially tying to grief, how a lot of the time we're looking at a lot of our anxieties from the past, a lot of our anxieties for the future. During those times when you're focusing a lot on that, obviously you can come to poetry to bring those emotions out, but how did you like stay present in the moment to try to
write them, you mean, or to teach?
Or even just to go on in life, like to teach and,
I don't know. I mean, I never felt consciously suicidal, because when you watch somebody trying to stay alive, you know, you just can't throw your life away. But there were plenty of days, I mean, for years, I didn't like waking up in the morning. Thought, what kind of life is this? If every morning I wake up, I don't really want to be here. And I think we just had a speaker on campus, Kaveh Akbar, who's the writer of a book that you should all read titled Martyr. It's the word martyr with a big exclamation point. And he got asked a similar question by a student afterwards, and he just said, you know, we can't solve anything on our own. I'm not going to write the poem that fixes things. So you just do whatever you can do from one moment to the next, and some moments you can't do anything, so you need to curl up and be quiet. But you write the poem anyway, and maybe it matters to somebody, and you go to the food bank and you drop off food, and you do whatever little momentary thing you can do. And yeah, I hope most of us in this day and age don't think that we're going to write a poem that turns everything around. But yeah, the questions, you're right, they're here forever. We're always going to be devastated when we lose someone we love, and we're going to keep falling in love. So,
well, that is an optimistic
is that
note.
a good place
We
to
can
end?
continue the conversation with the coffee and the cookies. And I will remind you that the last 3 weeks we've been talking about how do I confront death. Next week we talk about what should my society do when I die, which will be an anthropologist's look at depth. But for now, would you please join me in thanking our wonderful speaker, Rebecca Wood?